Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, and we just talked about the Cowboys getting dominated at home by the New Orleans Saints. I do think that there are a lot of concerns there for Dallas, not a team that I had as a playoff team coming into this season. I also definitely didn't have the New Orleans Saints as a playoff team, and they might be making me look stupid right now because we are coming off of back-to-back elite performances from this offense, and we are seeing a rejuvenated Derek Carr. And Derek Carr is somebody that I've always been a fan of since his time with the Raiders, and I know that there have been some very underwhelming moments with Derek Carr, even including last year, where the Saints, it felt like, were one of the more inconsistent teams in the NFL, especially on that offensive side of the ball. But 47 points in week 1 to the Panthers, so keep that in mind. But 44 on the road against a Dallas defense that, in my eyes, is pretty talented overall. That's when you start to really get my attention. And ultimately, the Saints are a team that, again, we're going off of a 2-game sample size, but they have been extremely fun to watch so far. Derek Carr has, like I mentioned, looked like a new version of himself, where last year we just saw so much mediocrity from both him, but also, I would argue as well, just the entire offense was not what a lot of Saints fans were hoping for when they ended up going and signing Carr to a pretty lofty contract in free agency. And now we're looking at Carr through 2 games, completing 77% of his passes. He has 5 touchdowns to 1 interception. That interception did come in this game where he threw the ball a little bit high to Chris Olave, but we're seeing Olave back involved. Rashid Shaheed, the game record, one of the best names in the NFL and one of the fastest players in recent NFL history. 2 games and 2 bomb touchdowns to him. The one this week was even more so impressive because there were 2 defenders in the area. Derek Carr pretty much threw Shaheed open on that play, knowing the type of game breaker that he is. And that is another aspect here, is the fact that Derek Carr now has a little bit of chemistry with his teammates here in New Orleans, where it's a tough situation to sort of step in day one. Now, not to make excuses, because any quarterback that has signed a free agent contract has gone through this. It's not like Derek Carr is some sort of unprecedented obstacle in building up a new relationship with the Saints, but I don't know, maybe they're just that much more on the same page this year. I think that the running game, Alvin Kamara, a monster game from him in this game. Sort of, we've seen Kamara have these huge outings before, the 5 touchdown game in particular. Didn't quite get that, had to settle for 4 touchdowns in this game. Maybe if the Cowboys made it a little bit more competitive and they were still trying, that we could have seen some more touchdowns from Kamara. But I was blown away with the performance that we've seen. Underrated storyline that, the casual NFL fan isn't going to, really be paying attention to. But I think the most impressive rookie that I've seen so far is the Saints' first-round selection, Taliesin Fuaga, the left tackle. He's been starting there. Week 1 against Carolina, again, only can do so much. But when you talk about Fuaga coming into this game, he's being lined up against Micah Parsons, and I thought he was excellent all the way throughout. Couple misplays specifically in the run game, but he has been giving Derek Carr all of this time to sort of, settle in, and just a little bit underrated there, I think. Also, their other top rookie that they selected, Kool-Aid McKinstry, the cornerback out of Alabama. He didn't play a ton in week 1 against the Panthers, but got a little bit more runway in this game, and I thought he looked really good. Some matchups that he had against CeeDee Lamb where he really caught my eye, especially the one in the red zone where he ended up having a pass breakup. We saw him go from 28 snaps in week 1 versus Carolina, just 47% of the Saints defensive snaps. This week, 61 snaps, 87%. And ultimately, I thought he looked really good. And that is a hugely significant storyline for the Saints moving forward, because they could, when you look at, whether or not they can develop into one of these top contenders, you are looking at a defense that has a number of young notable players that have stepped onto the scene. Brian Brzee, their first round pick from 2023 as well, still continues to get playing time. Marshawn Lattimore out in this game, which is what sort of opened up the opportunity for McKinstry to play more. You get him back. Paulson Adebo has been somebody who has really developed over these past couple seasons as well. Still a very good linebacking core with Demario Davis, and you add Willie Gay, who started for the Chiefs in their Super Bowl run. I think this is a very talented team across the board. Alontae Taylor as well, one of my favorite defensive backs to watch in the NFL. Hard-hitting nickel back there, so was their leading tackler in this game. And I just think that, the Saints are a team that as much as excitement that I genuinely have for them, you do have to take into consideration that they were a little bit of a hit-or-miss team in 2023, where they could go and have really impressive performances and then in the next week end up totally falling apart. And I think that was especially, prevalent towards the end of the season, where they did actually end on a pretty good note, where they won 4 of their last 5 games. Now, got to take into consideration as well, that is against Carolina and New York, 2 of those games. You also have Atlanta, where at that point, I don't even know, I can double check here who is starting, but either way, you're getting Taylor Heineke or you're getting Desmond Ridder in that game. Neither one of those are necessarily impressive wins in my books. It was Desmond Ridder with a little bit of Logan Woodside actually thrown in there as well. So, you got to take it with a grain of salt, that little streak that they were going on towards the end of the year. But that being said, internally, there is definitely something to the Saints came into this season with just a little bit more juice. And now with 2 straight wins and 2 straight incredible offensive performances, you're going to hope that they can continue to sort of build off of that. You're not going to score 40 points per game, of course, but Derek Carr, if he sort of just settles into his role here, they don't need him to throw for any crazy amount of passing yards. In fact, the past 2 games, as much as the Saints have, been pouring it on offensively, Carr has thrown for 200 yards against Carolina and 243 against Dallas. Now, part of that also being that they were blowout wins, didn't necessarily need to continue to rely on the passing game, and that's sort of its own other conversation of what does it look like with Derek Carr in 2024 when you need to throw your way back into a game. I think that that's still a question that needs to be answered, but all things considered, it is very hard for me to find areas to nitpick with this Saints team. I think that they are one of the biggest stories in the NFL this season so far. And obviously, still within the first 2 weeks, that whole lot of football left. But, them and the Buccaneers as well, who look pretty impressive themselves, also 2-0, that this NFC South division, we'll still see about the Falcons. We do have them facing off against the Eagles tonight on Monday Night Football, which maybe will be a better gauge of where the Falcons are at this point, with a little bit of a longer week to recover from not a scoring-wise beatdown, but physically, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I thought the Falcons were sort of beat down and demoralized in that Pittsburgh game. That we'll see the temperature there, but so many people were just sort of chalking the Falcons in as that NFC South winner, and I myself had the Falcons winning as well. But even in those sort of projections, Buccaneers and Saints, it felt like, we know that they're a pretty good team, but I don't think that they're, one of the elite teams, and I still definitely am not jumping at calling either one of the Bucs or Saints elite teams, but, we're going to do an NFL tier list later this week, and I think that, the Saints and the Buccaneers, both of them climbing up here. And the Falcons, they got to be a little bit nervous. Not that, I am going to choose to freak out against a bad offensive performance against maybe the best defense in all of the NFL in week 1 for Atlanta. But and everybody was just sort of chalking them up as the division winner there in the NFC this year. And now all of a sudden, you have two really scrappy teams that, are getting excellent seasons so far from some quarterbacks that a lot of people have written off, and Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield. And now I'm legitimately excited after last year where truthfully, none of the teams in the NFC South really moved me in terms of I want to watch these teams play. I definitely want to watch the Saints play. I definitely want to watch the Buccaneers play. Like I mentioned, we'll see about the Falcons. But, this is a division that could sneakily have 2 playoff teams, which how many people had that on their bingo card headed into this season? Now, we'll see. Obviously, don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. But I love what I've seen from the Saints so far this season. Again, the combination of they have some veteran leaders in the likes of a Derek Carr and Alvin Kamara. You have Cam Jordan on defense, Demario Douglas on defense, but you also are getting real impact from some of these recent draft picks that it almost is meshing into this perfect combination of young talent and smart veterans that kind of feels like a team to me that can make some damage in the regular season and maybe even in the postseason as well. Also, I'm sure very, very few teams would want to go into New Orleans and the Superdome there to play a playoff game. So we'll see. Saints, though, love what I've seen from them so far, and I'm definitely keeping them on my mind. They do play against Philly at home next week, and I think that could be a game that could really give us some answers as to the legitimacy of this Saints team. So definitely marking that one as one of the marquee matchups of week 3. But let me know what you've thought about the Saints so far this season and the NFC South as a whole, which has sort of been a mixed bag in a couple different ways. A lot of surprises so far. Even with the Panthers, who we knew they were going to be bad. I didn't know they were going to be getting outscored by 60 in 2 weeks and benching their number 1 overall quarterback in 2 weeks into the season that bad. So a very, very wild division going on right there in the NFC South. But we are going to be shifting gears here and headed into our final segment of the day, where we saw the biggest upset of the regular season so far as the Baltimore Ravens ended up falling to the Las Vegas Raiders, as the Ravens now fall to 0-2. So we're going to be talking about sort of what the overall panic level is there in Baltimore, as well as just sort of giving some credit as well to the Raiders, who I definitely was looking to count them out, but just as I was looking to do so, sort of roped me back in a little bit. Antonio Pierce and that team as a whole is just so infectious. So we're going to be diving into all of that. But first, we are going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.